Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're glad to have you join us this evening. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. Oh, I don't see the chat box. Oh, just kidding. It's there. When you introduce yourself, make sure that you're sending it to panelists and attendees so that other folks who are here can see you too. And we'll start in just another minute.
Liza, don't forget to hit record.
Thank you. It's really fun to see folks from all over Rhode Island, Michigan, Vermont, Maine, Chicago. Welcome, welcome. All right, are we ready to rock and roll? Yeah, okay. So first I'm gonna hit record and maybe Harold will too. Oh, he's already done it. Harold, are you recording? Okay. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening for Working Outdoors with Young Children in Spring. This is sort of the sister webinar to one that we did in December, which was Working Outdoors with Children in Winter. And you'll see as we move through the evening that this is mostly directed at early childhood educators, but really people working with children of any age, I bet could garner some information from this evening and various resources. Toward the end of the night, we'll have a resource document that we might share the link with. If it doesn't go into the chat box tonight, it'll go out with the recording of this webinar. And go ahead and keep introducing yourself in the chat box as you come in. We're really glad to, it's fun to see who you are and where you're coming from since we can't see your faces. So tonight's webinar is a collaboration and a shared effort between NINPA, the Northern Illinois Nature Preschool Association, and Inside Outside, which are both professional networks supporting nature-based educators, environmental educators, place-based educators. My name is Liza Lowe, and I'm affiliate faculty at Antioch University, New England, and the manager of Inside Outside. And I am hosting this evening with Megan Gessler, who's the founder of NINPA and the early childhood program coordinator at the Morton Arboretum in Illinois. So I'm joining from New Hampshire and Megan's joining from Illinois. And in a minute, you'll learn where our other panelists are coming from. Oh, also, I just wanted to point out before we get too far, you can rename yourself if you want to with your preferred pronouns. So when we look at your name in the chat box, we'll see that. And also, yeah, tell us the school or program you work at and where physically you're joining from. We're recording the webinar. You'll be able to find it on our Facebook pages and also on our website. And we wouldn't be able to do this webinar tonight without a generous support of the George B. Storer Foundation. Antioch University has a nature-based certificate program. If you want to learn more about it, you can find out information. Actually, Megan's putting links in the chat box. You can find information on our website, on the Inside Outside website, and also on Antioch's website. And we'll put links in the resource documents also. All right, before I go there, Harold, do you want to launch our first poll? All right, so the first question that we're hoping to learn more from all of you about is, what is your experience working outdoors with children? So a lot of folks who are a few years in and still going. Just a couple people who are interested but haven't started yet. So welcome. We're glad to have you here. It's fun to have new people. Some folks who are old pros and lots of people who are just starting to get their feet wet. So that's great. We have a mix of people, and hopefully we'll also learn from you toward the end of the webinar, where you'll have an opportunity to share resources and ask questions. All right. Harold, do you want to launch the second poll? All right. So the second question here is, what is your role in the field? Do you see yourself as a traditional early childhood educator, a nature-based early childhood educator, maybe you're administrator, or something else altogether? So a lot of sort of like a mix between traditional early childhood educators, nature-based educators, and a few folks who are traditional administrators, and then other nature-based administrators, which is great. And I'm curious, if you want to put in the chat box, I'd love to hear who you are, what your role is if you chose other. It's interesting for us to see who's joining. So welcome to all of you. Thanks, Harold, for launching those polls. I wonder if everyone can see this. 53 people are nature-based educators. Oh, right. So mixed roles. So people who are joining us who are both teachers and administrators. Okay, teaching assistant, infant toddler folks. Okay, welcome to everyone. It's good to have you here tonight. Over the summer, the Council of Nature-Based Early Childhood Educator Administrators put out a position statement on nature-based early childhood education for all. And we followed it up with a document to highlight intellectual benefits. And then the most recent position statement that went out was on social and emotional benefits, and there are more to come. I think at least 2 more follow-up position statements. So stay tuned and we'll get those out there. All those live both on NINPA's website and on the Inside Outside website. We're going to welcome you to put your questions specifically for our panelists in the Q&A box, which is down at the bottom of the screen. So if you have a question as we're moving through the presentation that you want one of our panelists to answer, please put it in the Q&A box. Everything else can go in the chat box. If you have a tech issue, you can direct it in the chat box directly to Harold Hale, and he's our tech guru this evening, and he'll be able to help you with that. We don't want to get your questions for panelists lost in the chat box. So that's why we're asking you to stick those in the Q&A box. And Eliza Minucci, who's also adjunct faculty at Antioch University, New England, is the person who will be sort of curating the Q&A and keeping track of that for the end of the webinar. And now I'm going to hand it over to Megan Gessler, who will introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Liza. I also put a link to the Natural Start Alliance organization in our chat as well, because they have a plethora of resources on their website. Okay, so let's learn about who you'll be hearing from tonight. First up, Marilyn Brink works for the Mary Crane League, a Head Start program in Chicago, Illinois, and she works with children ages 3 through 5. Emma Hallowell works at Guilford Central School in Vermont and works with 4 to 5-year-olds. Harriet Hart works at the Braintree Elementary School in Vermont with 3 to 5-year-olds, and Sheila Williams Ridge works at the University of Minnesota Lab School, and she gets to have little toddlers in her program for 2 to 5-year-olds. So welcome, and thank you so much for spending your time sharing your information and resources with us. Very much appreciated. If you want more information on their bios, look at Inside Outside or NINPA Facebook pages because we have lengthy bios on there. Okay. You can forward. Liza, can you move it forward?
Yeah, I'm just seeing some folks are wondering about an attendance. It's the participants thing at the bottom is where you can see who else is with us tonight.
And don't forget to use your Q&A if you have questions specifically for those presenters. But now that we've talked about our presenters, we'd like to take a brief moment to share a few photos of the outdoor spaces, and we'll find that by taking a quick peek at our panelist venues. It gives us a little insight into their point of view, as well as gives us the opportunity to see such a variety of programming represented in this webinar. So I'll let them take it away.
So this is Marilyn Brink, and I'm with the Mary Crane League. We are re-envisioning the outdoor spaces at all 4 of our sites. Some are a little further along than the others, but they're all Head Start programs located in very under-resourced, urban, highly urban parts of Chicago. This particular picture is a part of a newly redesigned play space that is adding more nature and taking out the old, more traditional playground. I think you can see on the left-hand picture the L tracks, the train going by. So this particular site has a city park that is deemed too dangerous by the parents for the teachers to be able to take the children. So it was really important that we got nature brought right to them, but also allowed for a trike path and things like that that they might typically do at the park. So because there's not safe sidewalks to walk on either, and they're along a very busy street. So I just wanted to give you a peek into how we're transforming this typical playground into more nature-based setting.
Hi, I'm Emma Hallowell, and I teach pre-K at Guilford Central School in Southern Vermont. And we are a full-time program for ages 4 and 5, and we have 15 students in our class. And it's just a small public school. We started our program about 4 years ago, and we're very lucky to be situated kind of in the midst of some forest. And so we don't have to go too far to get to our outdoor classrooms. But you can see a picture of the school in the top right corner, and then our trek out to the school in our little wood space. Our outdoor classroom space is about the size of a soccer field. It's not gigantic, but it's plenty big for our little people.
Hello, I'm Sheila Williams-Ridge. I'm at the University of Minnesota Lab School. We're right on campus in Minneapolis. We're from our front door, about 25 yards from us is the Mississippi River, and then across the river is downtown Minneapolis. So we're a very urban school, but we're located on a university campus, which gives us lots of access to green space. We have children from the community, so any children are eligible to attend who are between 2 and 5 years old, and the school has been around since 1925. So we've been doing this for a while, and I've been there for about 11 years, and we just made a switch this year, mostly due to COVID, but our curriculum has been all outdoors, except for a couple of weeks ago. It was pretty cold here in Minnesota. The wind chills were in the negative 10s, 20s, 30s or so. So we spent less time outside, but we still spend time outside every day. And you can see pictures of what our both playground and the campus look like. The picture with the fire, that's on one of our playgrounds.
Hi, I'm Harriet Hart, and I teach at Braintree Elementary School. This is it's a brand new program. So it doesn't look like much at the moment because COVID has kind of limited how I've been able to develop things. So there's a little outdoor area. You can, in the far left photo, you can just see the edge of the school. So our outdoor classroom is just right next to the school. And it has the septic system at one end of it, which I decided just to make the most of, and we used the fence for an abundance of things. And then further up the hill, there's a little bit of forest, but we kind of back onto a mountain. So it's all sloping, which has been a bit of a challenge. So there are a few pictures there of kind of close-up shots of what we started the year with. And of course, at the moment, it's all under deep snow. And having started this program this year, my lesson has been that you can't create a full outdoor classroom in this short space of time. So I was a bit shy about showing off where we've got to because it doesn't look like much, but I hope that some of you who are just starting out will kind of take heart from what I'm doing here with just a few things.
Yes, thank you, Harriet. I appreciate it. We all had to start somewhere. Now that we've seen their spaces, we also asked our panelists to provide us with some of their favorite spring tips and hacks as the season starts to change. And the season is starting to change. We couldn't be more excited about that, right? So these are some of my favorite things that I keep at the ready at all times. I always have trowels and little metal pails and magnifiers and sifts or sieves that are ready to go in my spring tote. And we always use real tools for real children. My friend Sarah Sheldon, who should be on here tonight, taught me that phrase. So that we could place that in their hands. And honestly, it provides a multitude of affordances as they explore the outdoors, digging, scooping, experiencing volume, measuring. The children will find just the right use for their needs and for their ponderings at any given time. And you can use these at rocky places, muddy places, creeks, sandy places, snowy places, you name it.
I think one of the key pieces of gear to have for springtime is rain gear. And we end up wearing rain gear nearly every day in the spring as the snow is melting. We have snow. You'll see a lot of the slides that I'm presenting tonight have snow in them because we have snow pretty late into the season. And as that snow is melting, we sometimes put rain gear over snow pants. And there's just a whole host of options out there for rain gear. One that's not on here that's really high quality is Grundon's. But the thing that I like right now, my class has full sets of the Rama rain gear, and that is the green rain pants and the yellow jacket. And they also make rain mittens that you can get them that are lined or not lined, and they can go over other mittens or over a pair of kind of cheap cotton gloves or synthetic gloves, and do a great job of keeping kids dry. The thing that I love about the Rama rain pants is that they have elastic loops that go under, that can go under kids' boots. So that feels really great because then you don't end up getting water into boots and wet feet. But when we started our program, we didn't have the funding to buy the nice rain gear for our students, and started with just these Tuffo rain suits. And you'll see a lot of the pictures have kids wearing them, and they have worked fine for us also.
So I was thinking about what springtime often means for us in New Hampshire, which is tapping trees. And so some different kinds of taps, but then also a fun thing to carry, like make sure to have with you actually at all times, any season, is those little cloth measuring tapes. They're really portable, super cheap. You could buy like one or two, or maybe enough for all of your students. And you can use them year round for a variety of things, but this time of year, you can especially use them to measure the circumference of a tree that you might want to tap and the height at which you're going to actually put the spile into the tree. So a couple different examples of some spiles and a little a hand drill, which isn't any sort of heavy duty thing, but it's certainly child friendly, and you can change the size of the bits. And this brand is, I think it's Fiskar, and you can get it through, probably Amazon, but also there's a Montessori website that you can purchase it through. So I just gave these two examples of measuring trees and then also measuring little sprouts and then you can incorporate it to math and science and all sorts of things.
All right, this is my little tip or hack, and really it's just to explain why you're doing things to families as early as possible, because the sooner you can get them on board with why all of their stuff is coming home wet and muddy, like what the benefits are to their child, the better the experience is going to be for everyone. So this is just an excerpt from a book that we worked on. We have lots of letters home to families to let them know why we're doing that. So this one just explains, like, if it's not too cold and there's nothing dangerous, we're going to go out in the rain and children are going to have experiences getting wet. Minnesota is really rainy and wet all spring. Right now we are having kind of a heat wave. It was like 47 today. And so the children were like shedding layers and getting in the mud. And so it's really good to let families know the importance of why you're doing it and just all the wonderful benefits for their children.
I was just so enthralled in what you were saying, I missed my cue. So I wanted to take a quick moment to explain kind of the flow or the structure of the rest of this webinar. We acknowledge and emphatically advocate that early childhood is best experienced by cross-curricular activities, and that most activities utilize several learning domains at the same time. However, we also realize that many educators who are new to outdoor education must also plan and document according to their program's curriculum and philosophy. So that's why we partitioned off our spring activities into ECE domains that we took from the Vermont Domains of Learning. That link is in our resource guides. And so you'll see a new domain pop up every now and then, and that means we'll be talking about something a little different. However, please understand that the activities that we're talking about in that domain also fall under many other domains. So go ahead and take it away.
Can you think of all the domains that this covers? This picture, it brings me such joy. One of the looking at this just reminds me of the joy of this work, and I'll just never forget these moments where this child so excitedly swam through this puddle of mud. And so while I could talk about all the different social emotional domains that this covers, I think it's important for us to remember joy in our work, and for this kiddo too. And think of all the problem solving, the perseverance, the grit that is developed by being outside in these what can be viewed as uncomfortable situations. The rain and the cold rain in spring can be truly bone chilling, and all of the like facing that that discomfort and working through it, I think really helps kids develop that perseverance. We see so much social problem solving outside, so many opportunities for sharing materials, working together collaboratively on projects. But one of the most beautiful things I think about being outside in any season with children is the self-directed play and learning that happens.
Emma, too, before we move on from this slide, can you say I think I'm imagining those are steps on the side of that tree trunk, the old cut down.
Yeah, we had it in our, you can see in the picture, right in front of the shed back there, there's a giant, it's a white pine stump. Yep, exactly. And that was a beautiful big tree, and it was dead or dying and unsafe. And so we had a forester take it down, and then a parent volunteer just suggested, he said, do you mind if I cut some little like ladder steps into the tree trunk? And now it's so exciting because the kids climb up that stump, and it's hard to see actually, but just to the right of that stump, there's a little sapling, and the kids have figured out that they can stand up on that stump and then jump over onto the sapling and slide down. And that was not something that I envisioned happening when I was very sad about the tree coming down, but it has created a lot of fun opportunities.
And I just wanted to share one of the things that I share. So at the laboratory school, we also have student teachers, and remembering that in the social emotional domain, that different families and cultures have maybe complicated relationships with the land, and especially working the land. And so to integrate that into your curriculum, I think is incredibly important. So listening to families, and like I said before, like telling them why you're doing things, but also being willing and open to have them tell you why something is uncomfortable for them, and then being willing to change and learn and integrate new things into your practice. And so I just shared this picture of us gardening. I think about gardening as something that is so important in setting our sense of place. But one of the things that I really like to do is to ask children, like, what are things that they like to eat? What are foods that they eat at home? Or asking families, like, what are herbs that they like to use a lot in their own home, so that we can start to infuse some of those tastes and smells in our program, so that it starts to feel more like home for the children. And so this is us, and also just being creative. And that's a paddle from our boat that they're using because there weren't enough shovels, and we really want to inspire inspire children to be very creative with tools, and that one works just fine. So we were just turning the beds over, getting ready for the season.
Harriet, you're muted.
I know, I just did that. I can't believe I did that. You'd think after a year of Zoom and lockdowns, I wouldn't still be doing that, but there we are. Right, here we go. One of my favorite themes that comes up in the spring is nesting, and that's what we've got in these photos. So these photos were actually taken at the North Branch Nature Center here in Montpelier, where I worked for 2.5 years at their forest preschool program. They are just about to relaunch it, which is very exciting post-COVID. And in these photos, we've got 3 different kinds of nests. There's the classic woven stick nest down on the right here, using willow and red osier dogwood withies and grass. And then, of course, there's the big family nest in the top right-hand corner that can fit, you know, maybe 7 or 8 baby birds, depending on the size of them. And then there's the more unusual 2 stacked tires nest, which is just perfect if you're a small bird that needs to hide from dinosaurs or, you know, swooping peregrine falcons or, you know, whatever is coming at you. So these were the nests that were collaboratively built one spring between teachers and students, and all 3 prompted in-depth dramatic play centered on families, taking care of their young, babies, I was going to say birds, but also dinosaurs, because dinosaurs lay eggs too, right? And through these games, the students explored family structures, family life, gender roles, care and empathy through their play. The family structures piece I find fascinating. You end up having so many wonderful conversations with students about their families, about what a family looks like. And then, of course, you can talk with them about less traditional family structures, kind of broaden their horizons a little bit in different ways. So really, it's like the conversations that you can have with kids around this is fantastic. And you can easily expand and support this play theme by reading books about nesting birds. If you happen to find an actual nest, you can take a look at it, explore it. If you've found an abandoned nest, taking it apart with the kids is a really interesting thing to do, to kind of deconstruct in order to help them construct more. And what I also want to stress is the collaborative portion of this. Don't feel like you have to go out in your play area and make a nest for the kids and have it there already. Like, start something and then let them join you and take over and make it their own nest and kind of see what happens. So, nests.
So our next learning domain that we're going to move to is communication and expression. And so you'll see some different pictures that show children working on language and literacy and creative arts. And again, as Megan told us at the beginning, not that these have to be within just this domain, but just to set you up and give you an idea.
This is just a quick picture of something that is just really fun to do, which is painting with mud. You'll see so many mud pictures. Last spring, we didn't get to experience the mud because we were not in person, but a couple years ago, we had a really good mud season. And so we just got creative with all the different ways that you can engage with mud. And in these pictures, we've mixed liquid watercolors with mud. And if you use a good stiff paper, then you can actually dry it, and it becomes just a really great form of creative expression. And this is, I wasn't brave enough to sing songs to you all live tonight, but I did record a couple of spring songs. I feel like as an educator myself, one thing that I always want are things that I can use tomorrow in my classroom. And so here are a couple of songs that my daughter Iris is helping me sing. She is actually in my class, a 4-year-old in pre-K this year.
All right, so let me know if this isn't working, but I'm going to turn the volume all the way up.
Hi, we have 3 spring songs to teach you right now. This is my assistant. What's your name?
Iris.
Iris is 4 years old. And we're going to sing you the first song, which is called Spring Sounds. Are you ready? The melting snow goes drop, drop, drop. The little frog goes hop, hop, hop. The little bird goes tweet, tweet, tweet. The little vine goes creepity creep. The little bees go hum, hum, hum. A little flower says spring has come. A little flower says spring has come. Our next song is about a bird hatching out of its egg. Get our eggs ready. Here, you ready? Here we go. See the baby birdie hatching from its shell. Out pops its head and out comes her tail. Now her legs she stretches, her wings begins to flap. She flies and flies and flies. Now what do you think of that?
Mom just so
Down, 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 pop,
pop.
I hope that birdie's okay, that little baby birdie. Okay, the last song that we have for you is a song that I learned at an In Bloom conference. It's by a woman named Annie Nixon, and it's about maple sap, which is flowing. And if you don't have maple trees near where you live, there are plenty of trees in the springtime that have sap flowing through them. So we're going to stand up for this one. You ready? Okay.
Mom, the roses.
Rise up, rise up. Feel the warm sun so bright and strong. Rise up, rise up. Hear the water trickle and the robin's song. Oh, sap is running, 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 sticky and sweet. Sap is running, 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 sticky and sweet. And if you're like me, you often start songs in the wrong key. And so I'm going to change the key for this next one because it's always good to sing with a little bit of a higher key for kids. So we'll go. Rise up, rise up, rise up. Feel the warm sun so bright and strong. Rise up, rise up. Hear the water trickle and the robin's song. Oh, sap is running, 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 sticky and sweet. Sap is running, 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 sticky and sweet. All right, hope you enjoyed our spring songs.
Oh, I always like watching Iris sing. So I was just going to say that if you don't live in a place with maple trees and you are interested in tapping, I've heard of people tapping birch trees and Norway maples and red maples, and you can do a lot with non-maple trees.
So I'm gonna just back up a little bit to talk about Mary Crane Center. This is some pictures from one of the other sites that we have. The organization has been in existence since 1908 and was founded by Jane Addams, who originally founded the Hull House in Chicago, which was a settlement home for immigrant families. And over the years, we've continued to stay in those neighborhoods, working with the lower income, under-resourced communities that are there. So something that happened not last year, but the year before, where the agency received a grant to work in partnership with the Chicago Zoological Society and the Brookfield Zoo to develop some nature play spaces in the neighborhood. And this program had an unused sandbox area, a large outdoor sandbox that the teachers and the families were not interested in having the kids not putting new sand in and cleaning it up. So we decided to use raised beds for the sand and sensory tables, and then the play space incorporated a garden. So, but it started originally with the classroom teachers allowing each classroom to get a big pot and decorate their pots so they would personalize the experience for them. And in the later pictures, you'll see some more of the gardening, but it kind of started this way. And then the teachers were able to in this topic of creativity and literacy development, which really any of these pictures we agree could be parts of so many domains, but they were able to take some of the experiences the children had outdoors, and then indoors they did some documentation and linked it to creative writing experiences, but also creative art experiences.
And I just wanted to share a few examples of what we do, kind of the same things that Marilyn was talking about, but just letting children have a chance to be creative, and also like seeing that these things do cross so many domains. So you can see in the picture on the right, both of the children are painting. We have these plexiglass easels so they can paint together with a friend. Also pretty nice during COVID to have a piece of plexiglass between the two of you, but then they can paint on both sides. This is a picture from a couple of springs ago. And then we do also have face paint available for children. And again, that looks different during COVID, but that's a really wonderful way for children to be creative. It leads into dramatic play mostly, but it can be just a wonderful way for children to express themselves and to kind of embody the things that they want to do that day. And then we do have indoor spaces. I saw someone put in the Q&A about the program being licensed. Ours is a fully licensed program. And so we do have the indoor environments set up in case we need them, but we are also very, very intentional about what the outdoor space looks like, and that it meets or exceeds all of the things that licensing would want to see in the classroom every day. So we have an area for literacy, we have an area for science, which is basically all the areas. The same for math, art, all of the areas are represented throughout the space, but we do make sure that we have, you know, the number of blocks and all the things that licensing likes to see in a high quality space as well.
Okay, we're gonna switch it up to learning about the world, which is basically a broad swath of the sciences. So I'm excited to see what we're gonna talk about next.
There's our little ones again. I will just jump on what Sheila said too, that Head Start programs are highly monitored, highly regulated in terms of performance standards, expectations. All of our centers are also NEYC accredited centers and have been for many years. We really work to maintain the quality standards that are out there for families, for children, for staff, community-based organizations. So looking at these pictures, this is again more moving from the planters that the children were doing, and this little girl up on the left, the classroom. I love this picture. She is working so hard at getting that geranium in there, and the soil is really going everywhere. And it was wonderful to watch the teachers really embrace the messiness of planting indoors. They were redesigning the indoor space. When you first come in the center, the parents really were enjoying the gardening that the children were doing, and so they wanted to have it right in the beginning of the center when you walk in the door to welcome the families. And if you're the last child leaving at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, it's nice to have a nice, wonderful nature infused space to wait for your family in. But each of the children were invited to choose an herb, a vegetable, and a flower to plant. So they really were able to broaden their understanding of just what these plants were that were going into their pots. So I wanted to share those examples.
That's me. This is me again. And I mean, just spring is the best for like hands-on, really immersive learning. These are some older pictures that I found just because these children were all having such a great time. These are from Dodge Nature Preschool several years ago. And also the joy that I felt in watching these types of activities with the children on the bottom left. They were sticking their heads into the puddle and then flinging their hair back and watching how far it went and enjoying all of it. And then also just I mean, really all of the science that you're learning by putting that bunt pan deep into that puddle and watching it splash up and hit you in the face. It's joy for everyone, but also they're learning concepts that really create a wonderful foundation for their future learning about so many things. And they're so interested in the changes, especially after a long winter like we've had here in Minnesota. They have a chance to really like take their mittens off and touch things again and interact with the world in a new way. And so I think giving them lots of opportunities to do that with lots of tubes and letting them be really creative. You can see on the left, the snow had melted and we still had the like sleds and inner tubes for going down the sledding hill, and they put it right into the mud puddle. And I just thought, well, like you earned that because that was a genius move. So we really try and give them as many hands-on opportunities as we can.
I had a student with their head in a mud puddle today. It's great. A snowy, slushy mud puddle. I think, you know, another really, really strong benefit of teaching outside, again, in any season, is inquiry. And the inquiry opportunities that come about they're just abundant any time of year, but especially in the spring, because we'll start seeing more evidence of animals, or a lot of like new and different changing evidence of animals. So we have an inquiry basket that we use in our classroom, and in it we just have a lot of different tools for exploring: collecting containers, magnifying lenses, droppers, tweezers, measuring tools. We, just like Liza was talking about, the soft tape measures, collecting nets, notebooks, writing tools, field guides that might change with the seasons, tracking maybe in the winter, and more like plants and flora in the spring. So you can see that these kids are exploring with the inquiry basket. And what we try to do is have a lot of opportunities for kids to explore, but then to also talk to each other and share their thinking, share what they found. And this little kiddo on the right has just found the first worm of the spring, and it's like in a piece of frozen mud. You can go to the next slide, Liza. And again, with spring, mysteries in the forest, mysteries outside are everywhere. And this was a really exciting mystery in our woods last year, when we found, you can see that log. We came out into the woods, and there's a little favorite play space where the kids go. It's usually they usually pretend it's some sort of boat. But on this day, there were wood chips everywhere and holes that were new holes in the log. And so what a great opportunity for inquiry. The kids said, well, woodchucks chuck wood, so it must have been a woodchuck. And then another kid said, well, beavers eat wood. I bet it was a beaver. And then another kid said, well, but beavers live near water. And so we ended up saying, well, is there any water around here? And we went on an expedition to see if we could find any water. Sure enough, we found a tiny puddle that the kids were convinced was where the beavers lived, baby beavers. And from that, the kids became obsessed with beavers. And you can see on the bottom right, they have their beaver tails that are made out of old yoga mats. And so even though we didn't get to the true source of those wood chips, we ended up bringing in an expert who did teach us that it was likely from a pileated woodpecker. But beavers really became the theme of the spring. And I think in the springtime, there are just opportunities everywhere. We're finding more, again, like more insects rolling over logs and finding salamanders and kind of mysteries everywhere. And the kids' eyes really become trained to find them.
I remembered to unmute myself this time. Back to the North Branch Nature Center. One of the ways that I like to help children celebrate water in the spring and also in the fall is to get the gutters out. So Emma mentioned the bone-chilling rain in the spring, and I feel like finding ways to celebrate the rain when it's still chilly outside is really important. And this is one of the ways that I like to do it. Loose gutters allow for so much experimentation. Students can create and recreate channels, observe what happens if the channel is level or if it goes uphill. I once watched some students build a gutter that went down one hill and then it went up onto a rock, and they were convinced the water was going to go all the way up onto the rock. So watching them kind of figure out what was going to happen and what did happen when they tried it was fascinating. I've also seen gutters become chutes for wild apples and plums, spouts for water and mud, ramps for balls, as in the picture on the far left, and integral elements in dramatic play. I had a group of students who really wanted to lay sewer pipes, and they dug in the mud pit, they dug trenches, and they were playing that they were like the Department of Public Works or something. I guess maybe that some roads had been dug up, I think, in Montpelier to fix some water mains, and that may have fed into this play too. But it was just so fun to watch them kind of acting out what they had seen and experimenting in that way. So in the two right-hand pictures, we've got two boys who were bringing water from that huge puddle and putting it into a gutter system that they had created. So they're scooping and pouring with different volumes. They've got a maple, they've got a sap bucket there, and then a gallon cider jug, and then they were taking it over, and you can kind of see the boy in blue, he's got his hands right there, he's supervising the pouring. And so the whole time that this is going on, these two boys are kind of talking to each other about what their plan is. They're co-creating this system, and they're both so invested in the outcome. Adding a downspout is a really great, like we've just got that little short one, it's only about a foot long, but that was a great addition just for this moment to happen. So the nice thing about gutters is that you can often find them for free on Craigslist. You don't have to go out and buy something, but you do have to be quick because they get snapped up. So you want to look out for people who have redone their houses and are getting rid of their old PVC gutters.
for us in Chicago, I'm thinking about there'll be lots of those gutters as people are re-roofing their homes after our Minnesota-like winter that we had this year. But yeah, did that go one too far?
Yeah, so we're just going to move into another domain gross motor movement.
I like the idea that Emma mentioned about the experts coming in. We were able to partner with the Forest Preserves of Cook County, and they donated some large tree cookies to the center. And we really just had placed them on the grass in this one area. And we're probably thinking of trying to make maybe a patio that it might be a good place for stories on days that were a little too wet to sit on the grass. And they never got moved. And when some of these children, they called them lava rocks. Now, I don't know when they had experiences with lava or rocks like that, but that's what they made meaning out of this. And they just stayed in those same places, and they literally obviously were jumping from tree cookie to tree cookie. And after about 3 or 4 weeks, we went to move them, and underneath were all kinds of roly-polies and worms. Oh, it was just wonderful. And they were so, that opened up a whole new way of exploring their world now. So I don't know that these children had ever been able to do that before. So kind of a mistake in the way the planning happened allowed for that opportunity. And on the right is where you'll see a picture of what used to be the sandbox that turned into the garden. And I wished I had included the picture of the moms that literally did all this planting, because the weed bed on the top picture on the left, you can see the corner of what became this garden, the old sandbox that was literally a weed box. And so it had to be all cleaned up. And it was the moms that came out and got the shovels and helped the staff, and the kids did some too, but they were more interested when the nice soil got into the bed. So it was just a wonderful experience that just blossomed into lots of new learning opportunities and fun, and in connecting with nature that they hadn't been able to do before.
And I just wanted to include a couple of pictures of one of my favorite things with large motor during the spring is just that the terrain is so different, right? Like right now in Minnesota, the snow is kind of icy and it's a little bit slippery, and trees still have some moisture in them, but they're kind of cracking a little bit, and they're just so fun for the children to explore. So we do a lot of like tree climbing and visiting sculptures, and every day in the spring they're a little bit different. And then just giving children time to embrace the mud with their whole bodies. You can see this child lined up all of these muddy ducks. It's a little bit warmer on this day, but you can see just getting fully immersed in the learning. It was pretty great.
More mud. Just think about all of the social emotional things happening here also. All of the cross-domain stuff that we've been talking about. But so this boy on the left, he's got a giant pot, a big old lobster pot. Old pots and pans they kind of float around in our woods. And the heavy lifting that comes from moving that thing around. And this kiddo on the left particularly loved to carry around heavy things. In the middle, there's a child that's stirring the mud, the pushing and the pulling that comes from that. And then, of course, they're so dirty when they're done. And these kiddos were getting particularly dirty in their rain suits. And so we clean it all off by having them roll through the grass. And just think about that rolling, right? The proprioceptive system and the vestibular system and all of the sensory input that brings. The one thing that's not pictured here was a stroke of genius with one of my co-teachers who had the idea to get out some 5-gallon buckets, and just outside our classroom, we are so lucky to have a door directly to outside from our indoor classroom. And so we can come and go inside, directly to and from without having to walk through hallways. But the kids will take off their rain suits and then stick them in the 5-gallon buckets. And then with a big brush, they will scrub the mud off of their rain suits before we put them into the washing machine. You can go to the next one. And then similar to what Sheila was talking about with the changing landscape in the springtime, the snow melting, and while we try to go on expeditions, we call them little hikes, nearly every day, it is hard in the wintertime. Whoops, I think we lost the picture. It's hard in the wintertime when the snow is so deep, for little kiddos to make it too far in the forest on our expeditions. And so it's very exciting in the spring to start venturing out a little bit farther again. The pictures that you see on the right are of a little steep hill. We actually are on a pretty flat piece of property, and while I appreciate that a lot of the time, the opportunities for things like rolling and sliding are not as plentiful where we are, but we do have this one little very, very steep embankment, and it is probably about 20 feet. And we have there's a little tree at the top, and we tie a rope to it, and the kids can climb up the rope, kind of leaning back and going hand over hand, pulling themselves up. And it's hard to tell how steep it is in these pictures, but it is a tricky and challenging gross motor activity for them that they love. We call it Mount Everest.
Speaking of expeditions, puddle adventures are another great way to keep warm in that bone-chilling rain, keep warm and keep moving. We used to, at the North Branch Nature Centre, we had quite a lot of property to explore, and we just used to go out with the intention of seeing how many puddles we could jump in. So that's what is happening in these pictures. And of course, it's a great way to add some maths. You can count how many puddles you find. You can measure how deep they are if you take a puddle measuring stick with you. You can measure how long they are. I used to sometimes use my boot. I would go in the puddle, and we would wrap a piece of yarn around my boot and tie it. And then on the next puddle, we would compare whether it was taller than the thread around my boot or shallower. So there's some great conversations there about deeper, shallower, longer, wider, all of those kinds of math concepts. And you can also add a story as you go. So I love ambulatory tales, telling stories as we go along. And often when it comes to puddles, the stories are about like, who lives here? Are there sea serpents in there, or sea monsters? Or children always want there to be sharks in puddles. So that comes up too. But one year we actually did find some tadpoles in a puddle. So it's always worth looking for the life in the puddles.
Now we're going to switch it to fine motor development. Look at those little pincer grasp that's going on there.
There's such good fine motor happening in spring when children are starting to see like the bugs. Today we had box elders all over the place. Also, right, when they're practicing how to treat bugs gently, box elder bugs are very forgiving because they can live through almost anything. So in all of these pictures, children are catching something very, very small, and they're using their fine motor skills, but they're also just connecting and learning about things like how to be gentle and where its home is, and talking about it. And the little girl in the middle, that's my daughter Olivia, but she actually caught one of those little tiny toads. And so it's great. That's a little bit later in the season, but by now, by that time of the year, she had practice catching little bugs. And then when it's time for those tiny little toads, she can do that with a lot of care and being really gentle. So that's one of my favorite things and also just children getting interested and inspired by what lives where, kind of like you were talking about the tadpoles. It's amazing how many snails we find in puddles around different places. So.
Sheila, I don't know if you know this, but snails are really great swimmers. They do laps. They're in training. Anyway, weaving, this takes us back to the nest building that I started with. Weaving is there's so much that you can weave in spring. I often refer to this pincer grasp as your bird beaks. So when I'm teaching children to open snacks, I'm like, oh, use your bird beaks. And so they'll use their bird beaks to do that. And when we do weaving activities outside, I sometimes get a little paper bird and I cut 2 holes where you can stick your fingers through to make the beak of the bird. And I have the children kind of, you know, try pretending that this is a beak and like weaving like nest materials and things. But this activity that I've got photos of today is with red osier dogwood withies. And you cut long pieces and make a circle with 1 stick across, and then you can cut short lengths and help the children kind of weave back and forth. And the neat thing is that red osier dogwood comes in shades of dark red and also kind of a golden color, and so you can make patterns. And this is one of the only product focused activities that I do with students. And it's partly just because it's such a fun thing to do. It's so bendy. It's also an activity that you can do with willow if you have willow growing around your property.
I love all these ideas. I'm banking a lot for my own program. I know if you were on the teaching in winter webinar, that there was a presenter who talked about using tools with young children, and I think tools are something for any season, right? But in the springtime, let me back up for a second actually, and just say that what we find is that winter is such a time for gross motor. It's such a time for kids to be like staying warm and using and developing all of those, the core muscles and balance and all of these things. And that when springtime comes, they're ready to focus on more fine motor tasks. And I love that kind of mirroring the seasons. The series of books that's pictured on the right-hand side is available through Montessori services, and I just find that they're very simple and a nice way to slowly introduce tools one at a time. And so we have a kiddo who's hammering some nails into a stump, others who have some saws and a hand drill, kind of like Liza showed, that Fiskar's drill, yeah, we kind of slowly work up until they're pretty proficient with a lot of different tools. And then I imagine that a lot of people know about sit spots or have sit spot routines with their programs, but if you don't, it's a way for kids to have like one special spot that they revisit. And we usually do our sit spots just at the end of our morning time. Some people do it in the beginning. It depends on what your routines are, but the kids go and visit their sit spots almost daily. It depends a little bit, but almost daily. And sometimes they go and just listen, or sometimes they go and make observations, and sometimes they go and write in nature journals, or in this case, they have little slate boards with chalk, and again, little opportunities for fine motor practice.
So I'd like to share a little bit about forest pencils, which are literally just sticks. And in winter, they're very hard to come by because of the snow cover, but in the spring, they start to emerge and the mud starts to emerge, and suddenly there's a place to write just right there in front of you. And I've seen these work for children in 2 ways. So on the left, this was a student who was she was a rising kindergartner, and she was really excited about really learning her letters. And she would ask me to write letters and so that she could copy them. And the manipulating the forest pencil in the process of writing was satisfying enough to her that she wasn't concerned that there was no physical product other than marks on the ground. She was just consumed with wanting to practice. So that was kind of neat. And then on the right hand side, this picture is a child who is actually writing a note to himself. So the story that goes with this, I'm going to take a moment to share, because it was one of those magic teaching moments for me. He was really struggling to, he was playing in like a nook between two trees, and every time the other kids ran past, he would feel kind of threatened, and so he would pretend to shoot at them. And so I was working with him on feeling less threatened and more secure in his play, and also inviting the other children in to play. And so we had these conversations about how to invite people into his game. And I was standing nearby and someone came close and he immediately got defensive again. And so I gently said to him, "Oh, perhaps you need to write a note to yourself to remember how to invite people in." And I just picked up this stick and I said, "Here's a pencil." And I gave him this block of wood and said, "Here's something to write on." And then he just took it as if it was really a pencil and paper, and he got down on his knees and I helped him write a note to himself. And the magical part was he went back and referred to that note for the rest of playtime. Like every time he felt he needed it, he would like come back to his note to self that he had written, and he'd like check in with it. So I feel like there's this sort of, forest pencils are this kind of magical thing where if you treat a stick like a real pencil, it's a real pencil. And then you can write anywhere at any time for any reason. So forest pencils. Oh, and then of course there's nature journals. As Emma just mentioned, we used to do nature journals at Sit Spots, and I've seen these approached in different ways too. And I wanted to share just this this charming entry. So this boy in red, we didn't do our sit spots in the forest on this particular day because it was super windy and not very safe. So we were out, we had found a sheltered place in the field with dandelions, and we had our quiet time kind of spread out. And I don't tell the students what to write in their nature journals. I don't give very much instruction. I just give them a piece of paper. It's usually A5, which is what, roughly half of an 8.5 by 11 sheet. And I put it on a piece of corrugated cardboard to press on. So it's like a mini clipboard, but very cheap, with a bulldog clip or a paper clip. And I do baggies of crayons or colored pencils, so they all get their own and they go off. And then they come back with the things for me to look at, and there's everything from, like, you know, unicorns and rainbows and flights of fancy to pictures of me in the forest in my green raincoat, to this fabulous picture where this child had been measuring the grass. So I'm going to just read you the words on his drawing here. It says, "This is baby grass. I measured the grass. This is a really long grass." And then at the bottom, "This is a bee's wing because I saw a bee, so I drawed it." And I just, I actually scanned his page because it just was so charming to me. And it was such a good memory and a window into what he had experienced at his quiet place. And so my favorite part of this whole process is when children are doing their sit spots and their nature journaling time, I sometimes, not always, but sometimes will go and visit each child, and I will either have a whispered conversation about what they're noticing, or I will sit with them and put words onto their image for them so that we can really share a moment. And it's one of those things where, you know, so often the learning is in the conversations that we have with children. You know, how deep do you think this puddle is? Let's make some predictions. But when we do nature journals, for me, it's not about asking the right question. It's just about witnessing that moment that they've had that hasn't been interfered with by any adults, and just kind of sitting with them and being with them in that moment and sharing it. So nature journals can be just so powerful. And at the end of the school year, I take all of their pages and make a little book and that they can take away with them.
So sometimes our spring days don't look like the pictures that Harriet just showed of their students laying out in the grass. Sometimes it can be kind of rainy. And as adults, we might be a little hesitant to go out in a drizzle, but actually it can be quite fun. It's going to be rainy that day, whether you stay in or go out. So you might as well follow their lead and look at the smile on the face of that girl on the right. There is no way you can't be smiling when you see that amount of joy emanating from the children having so much fun in the rain. So with that said, that's the end of our slideshow, so we can exit that and we can get to all the really good questions that you guys have coming. I'm going to turn it over to Eliza Minucci, who has been watching our Q&A and getting some questions ready for our panelists.
Yeah, coming to you from the basements of Tunbridge, Vermont, in my quietest place. So first, I think people want a little bit of context just from all of our panelists about how many hours is your program and what sort of percentage of that average, nice weather, decent weather, which includes everything except thunderstorm, basically. How much of that are you outside? So let me pass it to Marilyn first to talk about your program and how long you're open and how much kids are expected to be outside usually.
So for the people that are here just in the beginning of this journey, I think that we're probably a very strong example of a typical early childhood center. Certainly Head Start programs are have, as Sheila talked about her program too, we have all the different learning centers indoors, and we're really making the move to be able to be outside more. Now we're sharing outdoor space, so we're rotating groups that are out there, especially during COVID, but that would be pretty typical anyway. So I would say 45 minutes to an hour would be spent outside, unless they're doing other activities that then they move outside to do.
And then maybe Harriet, you're at a public pre-K now in your first year at that site, although you were at North Branch Nature Center, but what does it look like for you in your public pre-K? How long are kids there and how much time do you spend outside?
So the public pre-K is 3 hours 3 hours Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And with factoring in having breakfast and also starting really early, students start arriving at 7:30 for an 8 o'clock start. So it's really very cold. So at the moment, we're spending about an hour and a half of that time outside. And then there's an aftercare program that we have stuck onto the end, which goes actually until 5:30. And so after lunch and rest time inside, we get back outside again for as long as we can, given that most of us have wet mittens at that point in the day.
And how about you, Emma? Another pre-K, public pre-K setting, how is within a public elementary school?
Yep, we're a full day program, so we're the kids arrive at about between 7:45 and 8 and are there until 2:30. And there is aftercare in a typical school year, but not this year. And for the first couple of years of our program, we were outside for about half the morning, so 2 to 3 hours, 2.5 so a little bit more than half, and then again for a little bit on the playground in the afternoon. And now we're outside. We start the day outside. We are outside through lunch. We go inside for rest and then we go back outside. So for, I don't know how many hours that is, 5 hours of our 6.5 hour day, 5.5 hours. And we're having such a great year doing that. I think that that'll be the future as well.
All right, and how about Sheila and thinking about the little ones? How much do you have those little people outside?
Yeah, so this year our classes, even the toddlers, are outside pretty much all of the time. We do use the restrooms inside, and on days that it is not warm enough to take your mittens off for snacks, so less than maybe 20 or so, then they'll eat snack inside, or they'll have a warm snack outside. So they might have like a mug of soup or warm cider and a cracker, things that they can navigate. We also did some kebabs so they could eat things off of a stick, so that they could keep their mittens on during the winter. So ours is between 3 and 4.5 hours, and they do spend most of that outside. On the days that it was 20 below, or so, we spent more like half the day outside, or in the afternoon when it was closer to the high, which the high was like 10 below, they were outside for about 2/3 of their day.
Thank you. Oh, there's so many good questions. I'm going to try to get as many as we can. There was some question about gear. And so here were a few questions. One was, do you provide gear? And Sheila answered the question in the Q&A a little bit typed. So I'm going to ask someone else. Do you provide rain gear or do parents? And then how do you manage class sets of things during COVID, like right now? And then when kids get super dirty, do you clean them up before they go home? Do they go home in clean clothes or do they go home messy? And how do you make that work? And I think I'll pass that to Emma first, because we saw pictures of your students in some what looked like class sets of rain gear.
Yeah, the summer before we opened our program, I did a fundraiser on, I can never remember. It's like the public school version of GoFundMe. If anyone knows what it's called, you can put it in the chat.
Donors Choose?
Yeah, Choose, yep. And found it really not hard at all to raise a few $100s to get a class set of rain gear, of those rain suits. And then this past year, our town and school did a gigantic fundraiser and raised quite a bit of money for like COVID funds, basically, for outdoor gear, and our whole school was able to buy high quality rain gear, that Weymouth gear. So yeah, providing the gear has felt really important for us in a public school. And we always have kids who, we always have kids have changes of clothes, because you're right, like the rain gear leaks at the sleeves and at the boots, and they do get wet, like, the rain's going right here also. So we'll change them when we go inside. If it's a really wet day, it is, it's a little bit hectic, but we manage.
Great. And what about class sets of things and materials during this year? Harriet, do you want to go for that? How is it? And no judgment, things are just different in different places. And so it's okay what you do. Just that's all you have to tell us.
Also, this year is so wonky. I feel like I've spent all year kind of second guessing myself and reflecting on my practice, and then realizing that actually it's just COVID, right, that's getting in the way. So managing sets of things. So I have Oki rain suits. My school bought a full set for my class this year because they had just hired me specifically to do this outdoor program. So they were also like, yeah, we'll get you what you need. And I have each child at the beginning of the year, I fitted them for a suit, and I have their name on tape inside the suit. They're all on hooks that have their kid's name on. So there's no sharing of suits. And the school also has a policy this year that if we lend something to a child, it's theirs now. So we don't, because of COVID, we're not actually allowed to like lend stuff and then keep it. We don't have a washing machine at school, so it would be on me to wash stuff all the time. And I actually have an 8-month-old, so I'm already drowning in laundry. So I wasn't going to take that on. So I ordered a bunch of mittens specifically for this year, so I could just provide children with mittens also. Materials, I have, because I only have 4 days of the week, I have different materials for each day, and then they get put away for the rest of the days. And so at the beginning of the school year, with the regulations were that we could, like, if you've used something, then 72 hours later, you can use it again. So I figured, like, if we only use the Monday supplies on Monday, then that's longer than 72 hours. There are some exceptions to that now, and at our school things have relaxed a little bit more, so students are sharing more things. Like at the beginning of the school year, I also had, like, every child had a set of markers in a box. Those are their markers, you know, that kind of thing. But then outside we were much more relaxed, and there was a lot more sharing going on of materials. I don't know if that really answers the question. I hope so.
I think it does. Yeah, no, I think that's wonderful. And I saw some other panelists nodding heads as if some of those things sounded familiar. So you're not alone, although we all feel alone in our little silos. Marilyn, I wonder if you can speak to bringing nature to children in areas that don't look so green when you walk out the door of your school, and how nature comes inside, or where you find it outside.
Right. Well, one of the, I'll talk about that first center that I showed the pictures of, the play space that's going through the redesign now. There will be plantings out there. They planted them in November, so clearly they'll be coming back in the spring to redo that. But one of the things that a couple of the teachers wanted to do is to grow some vegetables outside. They were really interested in having the children experience growing foods like we had done at the other center. And they're not in a neighborhood that they can really safely do that in terms of animals coming in. We had to put in an 8-foot fence because people climb the fences at night and want to sleep in the play space. So so that was kind of, they said, well, let's try growing the vegetables inside, because there's lots of beautiful sunlight that comes through the windows, and some teachers have done that already. So they're going to be adding more planters right in front of the windows in their classrooms, so they can get that same experience of growing vegetables, but they just won't be doing them outside and feeding the neighborhood animals. So yeah, but they also have lots of natural materials inside. They've been part of a training program that helped them think about adding more nature to their spaces, and thinking about, even when the children go on walks, that they're really going on adventures and looking for bushes and trees in the neighborhood that they can adopt and can watch. So if they don't see the green space necessarily right near the play space, that one play space, they actually walk by 2 abandoned houses and across an alley to get to it. So it's quite a urbanized setting for the kids. So we're doing as much as we can to put that beautiful space right where they can access it regularly.
Is that a training program that people could seek out that you were talking about bringing nature in?
You know, I can connect you with, it was through the Chicago Zoological Society, and with the COVID, that's where I used to work. So the program's currently not in its full running, but I could definitely share information of the people that are still there on what's going on with that. Sure. I'll put that in the chat.
There was one question I was just going to answer quick about the ticks and poison ivy. Lots of experience in Vermont with that, and we just teach about it. We put poison ivy in plastic bags, tape it closed, and draw it. Or we look at ticks, we understand them, and we communicate with families. I think that's the really super fast answer, but we don't let it stop us. Questions about, are there any how are outdoor things organized? So Sheila, you have a lot of outdoor spaces and a lot of areas and materials, and how do you keep it organized to a level where adults feel comfortable?
You know,
and do the kids participate?
It really depends on the teacher. And so teachers have a lot of autonomy in creating the spaces that they're most comfortable with. And it's a lab school, so we have student teachers that are more comfortable or less comfortable with some things. But we do talk to them about that children should be able to take things wherever they would like, and like think about the ways that they use materials. But we generally have an area set up for, you know, literacy with a blanket. And so it looks a little bit like the classrooms, but it's not something that's prescriptive. So there are, you know, areas where children can play kitchen, but they can also play, you know, something else in that space and move things. A lot of it is places for tree climbing. You know, there's a hill for sledding, but they could do all sorts of things, adding ramps and doing different things. The hay bales that we use for the sledding hill, before and after there's any snow on the hill, they use those hay bales for doing lots of different things. So we try and keep it flexible and let teachers have an opportunity to be able to follow the children and to follow their lead in how they would like to use the spaces throughout the year.
Can I just add one more thing onto that?
Yeah, please.
Just that this is an exciting time of year because as the snow is melting, we're finding all of the things that have been lost out in the forest. Because as much as we try to, like, you know, put things at the end of our playtime, we try to put the tools back and the pots and pans in a place where we can find them again. They're never all there. So it's a fun time.
Actually, that's a great segue into another quick question, which may be directed to Harriet about, so when you're making stump circles or, you know, using stumps, do you ever fix them to the ground, or are they always movable? And does that cause any problems, or how do you manage stump seats?
That's a good question. This year was an experimentation because they were donated to me and they arrived and they were like, I have 3-year-olds and some of my 3-year-olds are tiny and they sat on the stumps and their feet were swinging. And I took a look around and I thought, well, this isn't going to work. So I actually had all of my stumps cut in half. And now, of course, they've completely disappeared because they were then so short that it took 3 snowstorms and now we don't have any stumps. So but that's part of the joy of spring, right? We'll rediscover them. I don't fix them to the ground. So the area that we're in right now is grassy, and once you've had the stumps there for a while, you know, the grass grows up around them, kind of anchors them in place a little bit. Eventually they get frozen down where we are. I think it's great for kids to move stumps around. Having a circle is an essential part of my classroom, you know, having that gathering space. So if students want to move the stumps around, I tend to have a whole bunch extra stumps that they can move in other places. And then we'll talk about why we're not going to rearrange the gathering space, because we're inevitably going to need it to gather at the end of each session. We have a closing circle out there. So, but that's a conversation that I'll have with them about, which is about, you know, what this space means and why we need these stumps here and where they can do what they want to be doing. So I've not had any safety issues really. And we're on a slope. Most of our classroom is sloping, but it hasn't been a safety issue so far, not having them stuck to the ground.
And then how about regulations and ratios? And if you have within your program set different ratios for the nature play portion, or if you still are in regulated spaces and so your regulated set ratio applies. I think maybe start with Marilyn and then move to Sheila maybe on that. About, do you have different program ratios for outdoor play depending on where it happens?
No, we maintain the same ratios at all times, indoors and out. And even in terms of the number of children that can be on the outdoor play space when we can, that's limited as well. So we maintain the regulations.
And so even when you go for a walk, even when teachers are taking their students for a walk in the neighborhood, you're at, if it's 3 to 5, maybe a 1 to 10 ratio or something like that.
We actually have 3 paid staff in every classroom. You know, the needs of the children are such that just to be safe and have meaningful experiences, we need to have a lower teacher-child ratio.
Perfect. Yeah. And how about you, Sheila?
Yeah, ours is the same, but because we have student teachers as part of our ratios end up this year, they're like 1 to 3.
Yeah.
Even for preschoolers, because we have a maximum group size of 10 right now. And because that's what the Department of Health regulated or preferred at the beginning of the year. And now they have moved to a group size of 15, but it's already March. So we're just going to keep this. So we're planning on in the fall having group sizes of 15 with 12 children and 3 adults. So we have pretty low ratios. But in the past, non-COVID times, we would have families come with us on field trips and explorations that we would go on, especially when there were going to be things like riding a bus, getting on the light rail, or crossing streets, that we like to have other adults nearby to be able to do those things, since we're in a pretty urban space. And then, just like I said, 25 yards from our front door is the Mississippi River. And so you really want to have extra adults when there are hazards like that around.
This is really wonderful. I feel like we could probably go on for another half an hour easily, but we are at time, and I want to honor our panelists and everyone's time and end now. But that's not to say we can't come back to this. We will, as we mentioned, we'll share the resource document and the recording of this webinar on both of our websites and Facebook pages. I bet Megan will put the links again into the chat box. And both of our networks have ongoing workshops happening and opportunities for people to gather virtually and do Q&A, as well as other Sheila's network in Minnesota and some other professional networks. I bet we'll try to answer some of these questions also maybe in the resource document. I know there are a few others in the Q&A that we weren't able to get to. But I want to thank you all for taking time out of your evening, really busy lives, I know. And so thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of the panelists for sharing your expertise and your experiences and resources with all of us. Thank you to Eliza for curating our Q&A and managing that, and to Harold Hale for being our tech guru as always. It's really great to see you all, be with you all, be well, enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.